Marriage or any long-term romantic relationship can be one of life's most joyful partnerships. Yet sometimes what was once a promising union can become more like a roommate situation. Or it can be even worse. If you're in a romantic relationship that has gone or is going south, today's episode promises a wealth of actionable relationship and intimacy tips to help you and your romantic life thrive. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. Help. I've known my partner for 12 years. We've been together for 10 of them, married for the last 5. At first, we were the best of friends, and when we connected romantically, it seemed like the relationship of my dreams. But over time, the sex and fun have faded. We don't fight, we get along great, but I feel like I live with a roommate. My friends say I have it good and should be grateful, but I crave more. Am I asking for too much? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Manly, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manly, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Please note, as this episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. Today, I'm joined by a tremendous special guest, Monica Tanner. Monica is an author and marriage and intimacy expert. She will be talking with us today about bad and good relationship advice. Welcome to the podcast, Monica. It's such a delight to have you with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
It's a joy to have you, and I'm so excited because this is a great listener question that we're going to be talking about today, and one that is so common in romantic relationships. So common. And sometimes this one sounds like there's a nice friendship underneath, and sometimes I get similar questions where there's not even a friendship underneath. It's just dissolved. So we'll see how much progress we can make today. Before we launch into that topic, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you, you?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Texas. I went to the University of Texas at Austin, got my degree in sociology and child development. Soon after graduation, with plans to get a master's, I met my Prince Charming, and he swept me off my feet. We got married. We started our family. We had 4 children. When my youngest went to all-day kindergarten, I decided I was going to go back and get a master's degree because I really wanted to work with marriage and families. And about a year into the program, I decided I no longer wanted to do that. I did not want to be a therapist. I was raised by actually 4 therapists. My parents were therapists, then they divorced and remarried to other therapists. So there was a lot of therapy. I knew what that was. And there had been kind of, I don't know what the word to call it, but coaching was becoming very big. And even talking to my mom, who has her PhD and has been practicing therapy for like 40 years, she was like, coaching is kind of where it's at. Like most of us as therapists are now moving into more coaching. So I was like, well, don't need a degree for that. So I dropped out of the program and I became a coach. I'm licensed now or certified in relational life therapy, which is the modality that I use for my couples coaching. I am getting certified in sex therapy. And I just wrote a book called Bad Marriage Advice, Debunking Myths That Will Make You Miserable and What to Do Instead. I have a podcast called Secrets of Happily Ever After. And so I think what makes me me is an obsession with helping couples have really intimate, passionate, fun, happily ever after love stories.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, do you find that it's kind of perfection based? Do you see that this happily ever after is geared toward having a perfect romantic relationship?
Well, nothing is perfect, right? And my husband is actually so wise, and he's been on one podcast episode with me. And it was so funny because that podcast host asked me on a scale from 1 to 10 how I would rate our relationship. And of course, I gave it a 10. And I was like, I mean, our relationship is awesome. I have so much fun. I love my husband and my kids and my life, and everything's great. And he gave it an 8, my husband. And
Oh,
so the podcast host was like trying to get to the root of the discrepancy. And my husband's like, nothing's perfect, right? I mean, we're always, moving towards something better. And I'm like, dang, that's so wise, of course. So I would definitely not say that anything is perfect. Nothing is completed, finished. We're always working to be better, and we always can learn more. So I would give our relationship a solid 8, moving towards a 10 now.
there we go. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I know my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, that is the whole idea behind it.
Yeah.
That if we put effort into a relationship, the relationship with the self and others, whether it's romance, partner, family, friends, that we can really evolve and keep evolving. And it's so interesting because just when we think we hit this groove, this like, oh, I am in this perfect place, something comes along, some challenge, some hiccup to say, yeah, you thought that,
You've
but
got
no,
more to learn.
you have more to learn.
Yeah.
And so excellent. And what a great response. So I appreciate that. And I really love that your husband came up with the 8. That's very much in line with imperfect love that, just keep working at it. It
Mhm.
evolves, it changes. So when we look at today's question, the question of the day, how would you, in your work, what would you say to this listener who's really struggling with this friendship, but it's lost its sparkle, its passion?
Yeah. So the part when you read that question that really stuck out to me is where she said that they don't fight and they get along. And to me, when I work with couples, it's actually the ones that don't fight, that agree about everything, that I worry about the most. And here is why. Because as humans, we're created so differently, right? I mean, even if we were to marry our biological twin who was raised in the same household, I mean, get past the point that they're related, but even if they have the same genetic makeup and they had the same upbringing, they would still see the world in a different way because they experienced it a different way. No two humans can ever experience everything in the same exact way. So you're going to have different perspectives, different opinions, different preferences. And so when couples tell me that they get along really well, that's one thing. But when they say that they never fight, I always question, why is it that you don't fight? Is it because one of you has withdrawn? Because when you talk about things that you disagree about, it doesn't go well? Maybe we need to work on some relational skills. Is it because one of you is stuffing down some feelings because you don't want to rock the boat? Is it because you feel like not fighting or getting along really well is the goal? And so, you're kind of folding into your partner. What is the reason that we're not ever fighting or disagreeing about everything? And let's talk about that. So, I do think that passion and intimacy and, this really fun, playful energy that can turn into kind of some erotic energy it happens when we disagree, when we both feel very comfortable to be seen, to be heard, to have a difference of opinion, to change our minds, to be the messy, imperfect version of ourselves that we are. And so that, not knowing very much about this couple or their history, that stuck out to me. The fact that she did say, we never fight. We get along really well.
Excellent response. And what I really appreciate is how you ultimately distinguished between fighting and disagreeing. And neurolinguistically, fighting, I say this a lot in my work, brings up an energy of combat, war, you lose, I win. Yet, if we make space in our relationship where we don't necessarily have to fight because that can feel really distancing, we make space to disagree,
Mhm.
to communicate about how we disagree, why we might disagree, and find a common ground or at least be able to use I messages. I feel hurt, I feel sad, whatever it is, to create intimacy through the disagreement.
Yeah, couples who fight are not so problematic because we can teach them how to fight better, how to fight fair, how to disagree with respect and kindness. But couples who don't fight at all or don't disagree at all, typically there's some lack of passion or drive there. And so that is more concerning to me than couples that come in and say, we keep having the same fight over and over again. I don't know if we're compatible. We're constantly fighting. I'm like, oh, okay, I can work with this, right? But couples who are like, we agree on everything. We don't ever fight or disagree. I'm like, well, let's figure out why.
Absolutely. To be able to handle conflict in kind ways, in gentle ways, in empathic ways, rather than in a warring, I'm going to fight you and I'm going to win kind of way. So thank you. I think that is a really important piece that perhaps, and as you said, there may be loads of things underneath. Are they just agreeing so that there isn't that tension? And tension can be a little bit good. It can help us move and change and feel our own passion. Are they perhaps pressing something down underneath that's causing resentment and hurt? Or perhaps maybe they're in such a comfortable place that they're not pushing outside that comfort zone. And sometimes outside that comfort zone is where fun and that delight of learning, that discovery can definitely create passion and improve intimacy in a relationship. So thank you for highlighting that. What else did you notice in that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You bring up this point that sometimes just discomfort. People say they want intimacy, which is really interesting. But in order to have an intimate, passionate relationship, we do have to step outside of our comfort zone, meaning we have to be willing to bring our full selves to the marriage. And we have to be willing to grow and get uncomfortable in different ways. So, for example, something that I have started doing in the recent last 5 years is speaking on stages, right? And they say that like fear of public speaking is greater than the fear of death, right? Most people would rather die than to speak in front of a whole bunch of people, right? But that discomfort and me going through that discomfort and like stretching myself and everything that comes with it, right? I mean, we've had speaking engagements that I've just basically crumbled and been like, I can't do it. Like, I'm just like, freaking out about it. And then, the excitement that comes when I have mastered it and got up there and did something really difficult. All of those emotions, all of that experience for me and having a partner perfectly or imperfectly support me through that has created a lot of passion and respect and excitement in our relationship, right? Because that first engagement where I was talking about where I just totally crumbled, my husband wasn't very supportive at all. In fact, he was like, pull out, like this is stupid, like this is consuming you, you're not taking care of your other responsibilities. And I'm kind of bugged. I was bugged by that, right? Like he didn't support me in the way I wanted support. And what I learned from that is that I need to actually tell him how I want him to support me because he can't guess. And so then, in the next opportunity where I practiced and I felt comfortable and I went up there even though I was scared and I accomplished something, I even got an award for it. It was pretty cool. But he supported me in the exact right way. But we all grew through that because I did something that was difficult. I also explained how I wanted him to support me through it, And so we grew together as a couple. I grew as a person, we grew as a couple. And so there's lots of examples like that. And so this couple seems to me like they've known each other, I can't remember, maybe for 12 years. They've been together for 10, married for 5. And maybe they've, fallen into a routine where neither of them is really growing or pushing themselves or grappling with anything, changing their mind about something, and they've fallen into kind of a roommate syndrome. And I think of this when I see couples at dinner and they're not really talking about anything. They're the weather, the menu, just really surface level conversations. A lot of times it's because those couples have kind of figured out what they can talk about without creating conflict and what they cannot. And so they stay really surface. They don't talk about, what are you learning right now? How are you pushing yourself? What is challenging you? What are you excited about? What's, difficult? What questions in the universe are you grappling with right now? Right. Like, I love to ask my husband questions like that. What are you reading about? Who's challenging to work with at work right now? Like, who do you talk to that just like really like gets your neurons firing? Those are the types of things that we talk about. But a lot of times couples get to a point where they don't want to bring up difficult topics or challenge each other to think differently about things because they're afraid of what might happen or they don't feel safe to have these conversations. And so I wonder if this couple's been together a long time, they've kind of fallen into a routine, they're afraid to rock the boat, they're not sure what if they can change their mind about things or how to ask questions that challenge each other. And so I would say, I mean, I have a really fun challenge that I do for couples that kind of gets them thinking in this direction, but I would say learn something new to get either individually and share it with each other or together. I would definitely advise them to go on date nights. I think that's so important. Like, do
Let's take
something.
a pause. Let's take a pause.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot here. So let's pause about the part where when we get into new territory in a relationship or new territory in the self, where you were talking about you and being on stage and how that was uncomfortable for you and challenging you. And then from that, among other things, you learned, oh, I need to state my needs to my partner. I need to tell my partner what is happening for me and what I need from them. And I think that alone is such an important relationship lesson. So often we expect our partners to know precisely what we need. And maybe they did know what we needed last year or in situation A, but because we're always evolving, what we needed last year or today may be different. So all of us being able to state to a partner, a friend, family member, this is where I am, and I really would feel good to me if you could do X, Y, and Z for me. And if you don't know what you need, at least being able to say, I really need your support. I don't know exactly what that looks like because I'm so confused and overwhelmed. Could you tell me how you might be able to be there for me? So I really love that you highlighted this as one of the good relationship advice tips. State your needs to your partner. Then you've passed the ball to the partner, and it is their responsibility in a way to be able to show up as best they can to meet those needs. So thank you for highlighting that piece. The next piece that I wanted to highlight that you brought up was the importance of being able to notice if you're feeling uncomfortable in a conversation and know that that's not bad. Feeling uncomfortable when a partner brings up a topic, getting out of that superficiality is actually a sign of personal growth and relational growth when you can get out of those basic topics, basic patterns, how's the weather, how's the sports game, and into those core topics that propel both listener and speaker to dig a little deeper. And I don't know about you in your work, but certainly in mine, it's one of the key relationship complaints that my partner stays surface. I want to go deeper. And it doesn't just come from my one gender, it comes from a variety of clients, male, female, not specified, that they're saying, hey, let me go deeper with you. Let me go into that intimate world. Let me hear you tell me what you see in me, and I'll tell you what I see in you, and let's see how we're evolving and changing. So again, thank you for highlighting both of those, because just because you feel anxious or uncomfortable doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It often means, unless the person's being abusive, then it might simply be a sign that you're digging into an unknown realm. And that too can ignite passion and joy and fun. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, my pleasure. One of the reasons I brought up that speaking on stage is because me being able to do that was really attractive to my husband. Because even though it made me show up imperfectly in a lot of ways as I was preparing for that, me being able to overcome that and like grow in that way was really attractive to my spouse. And then my spouse being able to actually support me in the way that I wanted to be supportive was really attractive to me, right? And so, like, I feel like, step out of your comfort. If you're feeling kind of blah in your relationship, like you want more, usually that is a sign that it's time to get uncomfortable. Like it's time to learn something new. It's time to grow in some way. It's time to question something that feels, very stagnant. That's a great, great way to stimulate some excitement and interest in your relationship.
And that makes perfect sense because often we're drawn to partners in the beginning because we see something. We like their curiosity, we like their energy, we like their, what charisma, whatever it might be. And then if that's a facade, it's going to evaporate fairly quickly. But as you say, if we get into our patterns, we're like, I don't have to try anymore. I don't have to work and grow. And then you can not that you need to be doing things to be attractive to your partner, but if you're doing things that make you feel attractive to you, energize you, then your partner, it's likely that same energy that they fell in love with in the first place.
Yeah.
So not needing to reinvent yourself or be a different person, but being your authentic, ever learning, ever evolving self is generally really attractive to not only the self, but others because it stimulates that joy that makes you radiant and glow. So again, that's a terrific tip. So question for you. What is one of you talk about bad marriage advice, bad relationship advice? What would you say is one of the most unhelpful types of relationship advice that you tend to see?
Yeah. Well, thank you for this question. You're bringing up my book, Bad Marriage Advice. And it has a lot of bad marriage advice in it. But kind of as we've been talking today, maybe for this couple that we're answering this question for, one of the worst, I feel, pieces of marriage advice that I hear all the time, and it makes me just, like, yeah, like there's a meme where he's just like, "Bah." But when you ask an older couple, like a sweet older couple that they've done a great job, they're happily married after, multiple decades. And a lot of times they'll say, you have to learn to compromise. And I just want to go, no, you don't have to compromise. You never, ever have to compromise. And I think that this is outdated advice because maybe at some point that was necessary, but it no longer is. We have so many resources, so many options these days, no matter what topic you're talking about, whether it's how to educate your kids, where you're going to live, how you're going to work, where you're going to eat for dinner. There are so many options. And so I don't think you ever have to compromise. Compromise to me means I give a little, you give a little. We don't give it a lot of thought. We just end up with something that neither of us really wanted. When the alternative is to collaborate. And what that looks like is I get really curious about my position, my ideas. Sometimes you'll surprise yourself. You're like, I feel really strongly about this. I'm not sure why. Let me think about this. Maybe it's because of how I was raised. Maybe it's because of an old relationship. I feel really strongly this is my position on how this should be done. So get really curious about your position. And then get really curious about your partner. Like, what do they feel strongly about? Why do they feel so strongly about it? Like, what is great about the way they're seeing it differently than I am? And then also get curious about what are my reservations about my partner's position and what are their reservations about mine? And then once you get all of that out on the table, you get really creative and resource. Like, I bet we can come up with some really cool, creative way to solve this problem that's better. It takes the best of what you feel strongly about and the best of what I feel strongly about. And we can create a solution that's better than either of us could have come up with on our own. That's why they say two is always better than one, right? But if you see your partner as this annoying person who has different ideas than you do, and why can't they just think about it like I do, then you're really cutting off so much of that creative energy that you could use to come up with something really cool.
Okay. I hear you. I hear you. I can see absolutely how you can learn and grow by jumping into other people's point of view. I think that's always, always necessary because, you think about like a home remodel or anything where you get two heads coming in, and then one person's perspective may be a bit myopic, and when you bring in the other person's perspective, they may like add some fire to it, some life, some richness, whatever it is. So in that way, I'm very much in agreement. On the other hand,
Yeah.
so personally see that compromise, whether it's in politics, in relationships, in friendships, that sometimes finding, I'm thinking of like vacation time with a girlfriend or something, and they want to go to this place and I want to go to that place. And so we put our heads together and we ultimately, and it's been really successful, both romantically and in friendships, find a solution that is a compromise because it's something that feels good. It might not be, a trip, say, that the other person couldn't afford or somebody else can't afford, but you find something. So I think that those skills of compromise, again, from my vantage point as a clinical psychologist, that's just my experience, that
Yeah.
helping people work that muscle of not needing it to be my way or the highway, and sometimes coming to that middle place, that compromise space, can be really good, not only for self-esteem of this individual, but also the other individual who feels like, oh, I didn't have to win or lose. I was able to find something in the middle that, gosh, that actually felt good to give a little bit. So
Mhm.
I think in certain but that's my own take on it, but I appreciate yours.
Yeah.
Okay, what's number 2 of the bad relationship advice?
Hmm. Can I challenge you just a little bit on your compromise?
Absolutely.
Because I can totally see how you would say that. And like this idea of compromise, I give an example of this in the book and how it's like how my husband and I kind of created this template for collaboration because it does take a little bit of extra work to collaborate versus to compromise. And so the example that I give, it was our 7-year wedding anniversary. And my husband planned this trip to San Francisco and it was really awesome. But for our anniversary dinner, I grew up in a family that eats a lot of seafood. And so when we go to San Francisco, which is where my mom was born, I like to eat at a really expensive seafood restaurant that's on the wharf overlooking the water. And I think watching the sunset set over the bay is like the coolest thing that you could ever do. Well, my husband doesn't want any part of that. He doesn't like seafood. He doesn't like spending a lot of money on dinner. And so for him, my idea of the perfect anniversary dinner is actually like horrible. He doesn't like it at all, right? And so we could compromise. We could have compromised. To me, that would look like going to a less expensive restaurant that maybe isn't on the wharf, that maybe serves seafood and something that he would like to eat. So that would be a compromise. And when I say compromise, I mean, we don't give it a lot of thought. We just kind of give in, like, he doesn't want to spend a lot. He doesn't like seafood. Okay, let's make sure that there's an option for him. Now, with a little bit more effort, what we came up with was actually I got to choose the restaurant. So I got exactly what I wanted. I got to eat crab legs in a fancy restaurant overlooking the water during the sunset for my anniversary. My husband walked across the street to In-N-Out and he grabbed a burger and a shake and fries, which is exactly what he wanted to eat. And he brought it into the restaurant. Now, some people will be like the waitress was like, "Sir, you can't bring that in here." And he was like, "My wife, it's our anniversary. My wife chose this restaurant and I would like to eat with her." And she was like, "Give me 1 second." She went to the kitchen, got a plate, went to the bar, got a really nice glass, poured his milkshake into the glass, plated his burger and fries. And we sat there and enjoyed the most amazing dinner that was everything that was important to me and everything that was important to him. So that is an example of a collaboration. There's no scorekeeping involved. There's no like, I had to give up this time, so you have to give up that. It's just in our modern society, the way that things are settled now, there's no reason why people actually have to compromise. Now, that doesn't mean always getting what you want, but it does mean what's most important to me and how can we get what is most important to us.
Absolutely. And I think we're in an interesting way on the same page. It's a matter of linguistics.
Yeah.
Because to me, in compromise, there is inherently collaboration. For me
Mm.
to come to
But
this.
see, okay, so I
Yeah.
think that's where we're differing because I think when people compromise, they just like meet in the middle. They're not specifically thinking
Mhm.
about what it is that they are giving.
I hear you. It's not my definition of compromise. So rather than us get stuck on this point,
Sure.
it's probably better for the listeners if we move past it and just agree that
Okay.
compromise in certain situations can work. It doesn't have to be a negative. Collaboration can be really terrific. It doesn't necessarily have a positive outcome. If we collaborate, it means we're just bringing our heads together, may or may not create a resolution. But I hear you. I hear you, and I hear that it's part of your paradigm. I love it. I think it's important. And I think bringing that spirit of collaboration into any relationship where it's two heads coming together, which again can lead to a compromise or it can not either way. I think it's just a beautiful way to look at it energetically of being, let's make this something that feels good to both people so that the outcome feels good.
Yeah.
And whether it's a compromise or a collaboration, if one person is left feeling resentful, that's not, it's the energy. So really the energy we want in the end is for both partners to feel, doesn't matter if I got my way. It matters that this feels good to both of us. And, it's so interesting because I was just speaking to my husband this morning and he did something and he says, well, I did this because I love you. And it wasn't a loss to him. It wasn't a loss or a win to me. It was just the energy behind it, which was a tiny act of loving kindness. And when we bring that energy into, especially if one person wants A and the other person wants B, if we bring that energy of, hey, I want to come in here because I love you. And I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. It's being seen, heard, and understood, right? That's what we
Absolutely.
always want. Mhm.
Yes, rather than fighting at, needing to have your own way. And that's generally, if you're stuck in a place where I must have my own way at all costs, that might breed resentment. Okay, what's another tip?
Uh, so we were talking earlier about knowing how to ask for the things that you want. I think that's so important. I think we sometimes we come into marriage with this kind of fairy tale idea that if we chose the right partner and they love us enough, they're just going to know the things that we need or how to deal with us or talk to us. And that's the second chapter in my book. And I actually wrote the book for my son and his wife. They just got married 5 months ago. And we were talking about the book, and they really appreciated the second chapter because in there we talk about how sometimes we're just grumpy for no reason. And it doesn't have to do with our partner, or, it could have to do with something totally different. And how do we want our partners to respond to us when we're grumpy, right? And so my son told this really cool story about how they were dating and she was upset about something and he felt like she was upset with her and he didn't know how to respond. And then not only did he feel totally like helpless how to help her, but then she was upset about how he didn't help her. And so she was saying, I'm really, really working on that. Like just telling him like, okay, here's what I'm upset about. Doesn't actually have anything to do with you. But if you said this or did this, it would really help me. Right. And he was like, it was like the ultimate cheat code. I love that she told me exactly what I could do to help her feel better. Cause he's like, now I have the keys to the kingdom. And so I think it's really important to learn how to skillfully ask for the things that we want or need in our relationship and not just expect that our partner is going to know. As you brought up a really good point because, well, they might remember what would have helped a year ago, but you could need something totally different at this point. And so instead of leaving hints or getting disgruntled when our partner doesn't show up the way we want them to, why not just give them the cheat code?
Absolutely. And I like how you're tying it back to earlier, where being able to say to a partner doesn't absolve the responsibility. If they see something and they notice something and they know that they've, caused hurt feelings, it's okay for them to step up and say, hey, I realize I I took a pot shot at you, or I was sarcastic. So, hey, I'm sorry. What can I do for you? But if something's happening inside of you, you've had a bad day, you're worried about something, you think a partner's flirting with, somebody at work or whatever, it's absolutely okay. And in fact, vital to bring up how you're feeling in a really responsible way using those I messages. I feel sad right now. I feel confused. I'm a little concerned, whatever it might be. And when we use those I messages, we're coming from a place that makes the partner feel likely more relaxed rather than instigating their defense mechanisms.
Yeah. And the most important, everybody talks about using those iMessages, but I think what's really important to understand about using the iMessages is what's really effective is that you're taking responsibility for your feelings, for the story you're making up, or for what's happening, right? Instead of saying, you always do this, you never do that, you don't help, right? It's saying, I feel like I'm doing this on my own. And you're taking responsibility for how you're feeling in that moment or how you're interpreting the situation. And that's what I think brings down the defenses of the other person is taking responsibility.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you don't know what an iMessage is, you may have heard it as mirroring, reflective listening. It simply means you do your best to tune into how you're feeling in the moment and then speak that truth to the other person. And they don't have to agree with anything you say. They
Right.
simply reflect back. They are the mirror. And they say, oh, I hear that right now you're feeling really sad. Did I get that right? So not only are you tuning into yourself and taking responsibility, but accessing your feelings, then you're offering the feeling statement. And if there is a why, like, I feel really sad right now because you forgot my birthday, and it would feel really good to have a cake or whatever it might be, then it gets the conversation going. And then the mirroring continues until you're heard. And then it's the partner's turn to speak. But it really helps bracket all of that messiness with I said, you said, he said, she said, all of that stuff. So iMessages allow you to drop into that feeling state, access how you're feeling, and let your partner know. And so it can feel clunky at first. It is a bit more laborious than regular conversation. But once you get used to it, it helps with connection so much and clarity. What do you think, Monica?
Yeah, I love that. I teach my clients a lot of tools around this. And, it's hard because that's not how you hear people talk out in the world. It's not how you probably heard your parents speak to one another, right? There's not a lot of modeling for this type of speaking back and forth to one another. But even if you do it badly, like even if you learn the skills and you mess them up a little bit, you're still so much further ahead because you are taking responsibility. You are trying to understand your partner's position. You are listening for understanding and not to respond in a certain way, right? And so, I've had couples that it takes a lot of practice to be able to speak in this way, but it's because it's something new and it's more relational, it's more connecting, it creates more intimacy, it gives people more of a I like to tell a story when my husband and I first got married, he was very securely attached. He came from a family with a lot of love. He never questioned, like, is there enough love here for me? Like he just, everybody loves him. Like that's just how that is because that's how he grew up. And I came into the relationship very anxiously attached. And so we got the advice. So this will lead back to the advice in my book to never go to bed angry. And so I remember really clinging to that because a lot of older couples came through the line and said, don't ever go to bed angry. And so, we'd be nitpicking with each other late at night and he would just be like, I got to go to bed. And he would just turn over and like be able to sleep. And I was like, all of my panic responses would I felt super abandoned in that moment. And I'm also thinking like, but wait, the people who are really good at marriage told us we should never go to bed angry and you're just going to abandon me. And like I would spiral. And it wasn't until I realized that I was having this experience that he had never had before. He couldn't possibly understand what was happening inside of me because it wasn't his experience. And so when I finally got really vulnerable and was like, let me explain to you my experience, what happens to me inside of my body when you just roll over and go to sleep. All of a sudden, my whole body starts to just tingle like you're going to leave me, like you're going to wake up in the morning and be like, this is too much trouble. I'm out of here because that was my experience. And it doesn't make sense to anyone but me. And so once he understood that, he was like, oh, but here's the thing. Like, yes, I was using I statements. I was explaining it like, this is my experience and I take full responsibility. And I know it sounds irrational, but to me, it makes so much sense. He was like, oh, like, that makes, yeah. He's like, I can totally understand because that was your experience, how you would interpret my actions of going to sleep. So it wasn't me accusing him of anything. It was just like, this is what happens to me. So then we could come up with like a really cool way to handle that situation, which is, listen, I love you. I'm not going anywhere, but right now I'm too tired to figure this out with you. So I'm going to go to sleep. I suggest you go to sleep and we can talk about this in the morning. My whole nervous system was like, oh, well, this is a new experience. And then we would talk about it in the morning. And then we learned trust. And it was so cool. But that's the type of having I statements and taking responsibility for your own responses and your own interpretations and the story you're telling yourself and the experience you're having that really makes a difference.
Absolutely. And listeners, I just want to call out, notice how Monica said that her husband came from a place of secure attachment. If you're coming, say, from an anxious attachment and your partner is securely attached, those kind of healthy conversations, those repairs are much easier. But for example, if you have a partner who's avoidant, that very dismissive avoidance style, then you may run into someone who says, deal with it on your own. Forget it. I'm going to sleep. I don't care how you feel. Get out of here, whatever it is, which would trigger you all the more. So I just really want to call attention to it, the healthy use of I messages. Not that you want to get away from that. That's always a good tool. But Monica had a really lovely outcome because she had a husband who was highly communicative, who had a sense of deep, secure attachment, and who was able to respond in a healthy way. If there is a person with less vibrant emotional intelligence, you may find that conversations like that don't have that delightful of an outcome because the other person doesn't yet have the skills. So now, Monica, looping back just as we wind down to the listener's question again, and looking at their question, and they're saying, am I asking for too much? Should I just be okay with this? What would you say?
Yeah. Well, I think that is another byproduct of that complacency or that wanting to not rock the boat or ask for too much, right? I think if you're asking, am I asking too much? The answer is no, you're not asking too much. And maybe asking for more is what would add some vitality into your relationship. So being willing to rock the boat a little bit, to ask for what you want, to put yourself out there. It's a very vulnerable request. Like saying, hey, listen, I feel like we're a little stagnant. I feel like I want more out of this relationship. How can we work together to make it more vibrant, more exciting, more fun for both of us? I think is a wonderful thing to ask and a great place to start.
And I am absolutely with you because I think once we are able to know our needs and state our needs and be willing to enter that sometimes muddy territory of figuring it out, then it's up to the partner. If we're being quiet and saying, gosh, I want more sex, I want more passion, I want more fire. But if we're not stating that, the other partner doesn't know, they're in the dark. So once you're able to state it in a really kind way, like, gosh, I'd like to have, sexual intimacy with you more often. Twice a week would feel really good instead of once every other month or whatever's happening, and not doing it in a shaming way, but saying this would feel really good to me. Or I'd like more play dates, or as you said earlier, more date nights. Then if the other person is really wanting to bring the marriage to life, they're going to jump in and they're going to have questions. And okay, let's get on board. I'm not sure how to do this, but let's figure it out. And if they're not into it and they really just want to be complacent, then that's where seeing a marriage therapist or relationship therapist might help you see ways to come together and move forward rather than instantly saying, this is never going to work. I'm out of here.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
excellent. As we wrap up, any final tips, Monica, for our listeners today?
Yeah, I mean, there is no shame in asking for help. I think a lot of times we get to a point in our relationship where we just feel kind of stuck. We're just not happy. We're not sure why. And it's very courageous to be able to reach out and say, you know what? We need some help, some guidance. And like therapists and coaches, I think it's not necessarily that they know more or are, tend to think of myself as a fellow traveler. Like, my relationship is my laboratory for everything that I've learned. But it's just that we have a perspective. So I always say you can't see the label from the inside of the bottle, right? And so you're caught in a dynamic that feels uncomfortable to you. Ask for some outside help. And there's no shame in that. It's actually very courageous and a sign of deep commitment. So I would say to anyone who's listening who feels like, you know what? We're not fighting, but I just want more. Is that okay? Absolutely, it's okay. Ask for some help.
Again, I agree 100%. I think one of the most courageous and vital parts of any relationship is knowing, just like a car needs a tune-up, just like, any appliance needs a tune-up, just like a house needs cleaned, we need a garden, it needs sowed and tended to and weeds pulled. Why would we think that our relationships, that most important foundation of our lives, why would it take any less tender, loving care? So whether you're in a relationship for a year, 10 years, 20 years, if something's off and you can't sort it between you, it's great courage and strength in saying, hey, let's go and get some checkup done here and see if we can find our way out of this little mucky period with some help. And for people who can't afford therapy, there's so many free resources out there and books that for a cost of a couple of cups of coffee, you can get a great book to help guide you to stimulate conversation. And yes, it's just so many resources. All right, Monica, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So you can find me on my website as my name, monicatanner.com. And I have a podcast, which is a great free resource, just like this one, as well as my books. And I have programs that range from very inexpensive, like the cost of a cup of coffee, to working with me on. I do offer a sliding scale as well. So you can find out all of those things at monicatanner.com.
And listeners, if you don't have a pen handy, don't worry. All of the resources will be in the show notes. Spelling on Monica's name is Monica, and last name is Tanner, Tanner. So you'll find all that in the show notes. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. What a joy and a privilege.
Thank you. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you. And as always, to our listeners, thank you so much for journeying with us in this beautiful way, learning to evolve and become more of who we are and who we want to be. And thanks again. This is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanly.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manly wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.